Today I want to take you through how to find the missing side of a right angled triangle. We'll focus on finding the hypotenuse, and then I'll do another video on how to find one of the shorter sides. Okay, so we know that Pythagoras' theorem states the relationship between the three sides of the triangle. Okay, if we represent the three sides of the triangle using our letters A, B, and C, that's the most common way to represent the sides of the triangle. A and B, it doesn't matter which sides you put where, but C usually, almost always, is the hypotenuse. Okay, so when we write out Pythagoras' theorem, we want to write it out as c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. Okay, we always want to aim to have our unknown, or the value that we're going to find, out the front on its own. So when we're finding the hypotenuse, we want c squared equals a squared plus b squared, just to save any confusion. So I want to go through some examples here with you today, just with practicing our rounding and also answering questions the way they have been asked, because what you'll find is you'll get really good at the process of showing you're working out, but sometimes we forget to be careful and read what the question is actually asking us to solve. So it's really important that we check the requirements of every question that we have. Okay, so our first question, we've been just asked, so this is our first question, I'll number this number 1. Okay, find the value of C. So we want to take our sides of this triangle that we've been given and apply Pythagoras' theorem. So in this case, our hypotenuse is called C, which is nice and easy. So C squared is equal to, now my other two sides are, the sides are 12 and 5. Now I just want you to get into the habit of writing the bigger side first. Okay, so I'm going to use 12, so 12 squared plus 5 squared. Okay, now I don't want to find C squared, I want to find C at the end of it. So if I just have C, what I've done is I've done the opposite of squaring, and we should remember that the opposite of squaring is square rooting. So because I've gone from C squared to C, I'm actually square rooting this side. Okay, so 12 squared plus 5 squared. All right, now what I can do is I can actually put that in my calculator exactly as I see it. So the square root of 12 squared plus 5 squared, making sure that that all lies under the square root on your calculator. And that's going to give me an answer of 13. All right, so our hypotenuse is 13 units long. I always want you to check whether or not the answer is a reasonable answer. Okay, what we know about right angled triangles is that the hypotenuse is always the longest side. 13 is greater than 12 and 5, so yes, it's reasonable. Okay, and it's not like it's an answer of 1,551, because that would be a little bit silly when our other two sides of our triangle are 5 and 12. So that's what I mean by checking for a reasonable answer. Okay, so in lots of questions involving Pythagoras, we are not going to end up with a nice whole number. Okay, so we do need to make sure that our rounding skills are nice and sharp, because we are going to have to round carefully and correctly. Okay, so we want to find the length of the hypotenuse to 2 decimal places. So again, I'm going to write out Pythagoras' theorem using these sides of this triangle. So in this case, the hypotenuse is x because it is opposite from the right angle. So x squared is equal to, my biggest side is 10, so 10 squared plus 7 squared. All right, the opposite of squaring is square rooting, so I've square rooted x squared to give me x. I will square root the other side, 10 squared plus 7 squared. All right, I pop that in my calculator. And that gives us 12.20655 562. Now I've just written out the whole number for you so you can see what happens when I round it. Okay, so I want to round it to 2 decimal places. That means I want to keep 2 numbers after the decimal point. So I actually want to chop it off here. So what I need to decide is whether this whole number is closer to 12.20 or 12.21. To make that decision, I look at the number after where I've cut it off. Okay, because that number is 6, it means that this is going to round up to 1. So I'm going to get 12.21. So remember, when we're rounding, we call this underlined digit the critical digit. If that digit is 5 or higher, then the number that comes before it is going to increase by 1. If this number was 4 or lower, then this stays exactly the same. Okay, so our hypotenuse is 12.21 units long. Is that reasonable? Yes, it's bigger than 10, bigger than 7, but not outrageously so. Okay, one more example for you. Okay, I just want to say, sometimes we're asked to leave our answer as an exact value. Now, this is probably a new concept for most of you, okay? And it does require us to do our working out a little bit differently, because what we want to do is we want to keep our answer as a square root or a surd, which is what a square root is formally known as. Okay, so we'll write out Pythagoras' theorem using these sides of the triangle. So our hypotenuse is c because it's opposite the right angle. So we've got c squared is equal to 10 squared plus 5 squared. Okay, square rooting, c squared gives me c. The square root of 10 squared plus 5 squared. Now this time I actually want the square root in my answer, because if I put this straight in my calculator, okay, I'm going to get an answer that is not a whole number and it ends up being a decimal. So I think it's something like 11.18. Okay, so a decimal answer is an approximation. It means, oh yeah, the length of the hypotenuse is pretty close to 11.18, but it's actually 11.180333989, and I'm sure that number may or may not continue. All right, so an exact value leaves our answer in a square root. So we're going to keep that square root and we're just going to simplify what's underneath it. So we know 10 squared is 100, 5 squared is 25. So c is equal to the square root of 125. Okay, so leaving that as a square root is called an exact value. Hopefully that was helpful for you to be using that process. You're either going to get a whole number answer, you're going to have to round it using your knowledge of rounding, or you'll be asked to leave it as an exact value, which means you must leave it in square root form. Give us a thumbs up if you found that helpful. Remember, if you subscribe to my channel, you'll get notified when I upload new videos. And I will also upload, and I do also have a video for finding one of the shorter sides. So that's using Pythagoras in another method. So keep an eye out for that if you need that one.